Us today for another webinar in our Market Access and International Approvals webinar series. My name is Crystal and I am part of the Certification and Approvals technical staff here at Fiscal Compliance Laboratories. Today I'll be presenting to you the certification and approvals regulations as well as the technical requirements for electrical equipment, electronics, and wireless products and device approvals in Taiwan. The Bureau of Standards, Metrology and Inspection, or BSMI, is the regulatory body that sets the standards that are required by the Taiwan government for a number of diverse activities. Most products that enter Taiwan must meet the requirements outlined in BSMI. This covers any device with an electrical power source to require a BSMI safety approval. Radio frequency devices are required to be properly approved by Taiwan's Telecommunications Governing Agency, NCC, prior to being marketed or imported into Taiwan, and a certificate of type approval is required for regulated devices to be sold in or imported into Taiwan. We will also go over some details for Taiwan's RoHS requirements to keep in mind for devices you're trying to sell or import into Taiwan. Vista Laboratories is an EMC RF compliance test laboratory and product certification body, and experts in global regulatory approvals for RF devices. So today, we will be going over the requirements of radio frequency and safety approvals in Taiwan. In this webinar, we will provide an overview of the major topics necessary to understand the process and get your devices on the right track for authorization and distribution in Taiwan. If you have any questions on the topics presented today, or any other immediate questions regarding compliance testing and product certification, you can reach us at info@vistacompliance.com. Now let's begin the presentation. The Bureau of Standards, Metrology and Inspection, BSMI, operates under the Ministry of Economic Affairs, MOEA, and serves as the primary authority responsible for overseeing standardization, metrology, and product inspection in Taiwan. The BSMI's primary objective is to safeguard the interests and rights of consumers by ensuring that commodities produced for domestic use or import comply with the necessary inspection requirements before they can be marketed. To achieve this goal, the BSMI is committed to promoting standardization, metrology, and inspection systems that align with international practices. The Bureau of Standards, Metrology and Inspection, BSMI, holds the designation as the authority in Taiwan for regulating the electromagnetic compatibility EMC and electromagnetic interference EMI and product safety for various types of equipment, specifically including information technology equipment ITE. In Taiwan, BSMI oversees a wide range of product types such as household appliances, multimedia equipment, and others. However, it is worth noting that the regulation of RF, wireless, and telecom equipment falls under the responsibility of the NCC. Additionally, CNS standards, which are derived from the CISPR EMC test standards, are referred to as the China National Standards and serve as a basis for compliance in Taiwan. Lastly, certain standards are commonly applied to various products. We have listed some common standards. BSMI EMC standards. CNS 13803 CISPR 11 covers industrial, scientific, and medical. CNS 15936:2016 became compulsory at the beginning of January 1st, 2024, and covers audio and video equipment. CNS 15598-1:2020 became compulsory at the beginning of January 1st, 2024, and covers audio and video equipment. CNS 13783-1 CISPR 14 covers household appliances. CNS 14115 CISPR 15 covers lighting products. CNS 14757-2:2010 covers uninterruptible power systems. CNS 15663:2013 covers Section 5, marking of presence. CISPR is the international EMC standard, and it doesn't mean all countries will adopt this new standard right away. Taiwan is still using many older standards. Here's a quick overview of the BSMI inspection schemes, Taiwan Commodity Inspection Schemes TCI, batch-by-batch inspection, registration of product certification, RPC, and Declaration of Conformity, DOC. These are the different BSMI schemes, also known as the Taiwan Commodity Inspection Schemes, TCI schemes, which are administered by the BSMI as the competent authority by Ministry of Economic Affairs, MOEA, under the Commodities Inspection Act. Inspections of electrical and electronic EE commodities is conducted according to three schemes, namely batch-by-batch inspection, registration of product certification, RPC, and declaration of conformity. Instead of going through the complicated and time-consuming batch-by-batch inspection procedures, BSMI encourages local suppliers to adopt the registration of product certification, RPC scheme. Today we will be focusing on the RPC and DOC schemes. RPC covers a wider range of product types than DOC. DOC covers product types such as household appliances, electrical tools, and information technology equipment, equipment for switching the electrical circuits, wires, cables, plugs, and sockets, electric motors, fire alarm equipment, portable electromechanical tools. RPC covers equipment such as industrial, scientific, and medical equipment, fluorescent lights and luminaries, broadcast receivers and related equipment, televisions and video tape recorders and players, radio broadcast receiver, video and audio apparatuses. General requirements. In addition to following the applicable standards, the following items are required. Test reports within 3 years of issue. Test certificate within 3 years of issue. Appliances must be tested to 110 to 220 VAC. 60 Hz. All ITE and MME must perform radiated emissions above 1 GHz. In addition, BSMI requires that the national differences for 10 IEC 60335 Part 2 standards must be adopted. IEC 60335-2-2 subclass 25.7 equivalent supply cords that comply with CNS 3199, CNS 546, CNS 6556, or CNS 10741 are allowed. IEC 60335-2-4 Clause 6, Class 01 is allowed for appliances having a radiated voltage not exceeding 130 volts. Here's a run-through of a batch-by-batch inspection. Batch inspections, applicable to general commodities that are subject to batch-by-batch inspection and monitoring. Type-approved batch inspection, for commodities subject to type-approved batch inspections. For example, gas canisters, cigarette lighters, etc. Registrations for management systems, for commodities subject to registration of management systems, for example, cement, fire-resistant coating, etc. Monitoring inspection, authorized to be printed by manufacturers under the monitoring inspection schemes, such as toys. The procedure for BSMI batch-by-batch inspection is as follows. An applicant shall complete an application form and make the application to the inspection authority of the entry port upon arrival of the commodities. This may be a good choice for small quantities of products or limited production. At the discretion of BSMI, a type-approved certificate valid for 3 years may be required before applying for the simplified batch inspection procedure. Under this procedure, the manufacturer or importer shall have their products type tested by the BSMI or designated testing laboratories recognized by the BSMI and then file an application for type approval with the BSMI. After that, the manufacturers must file an application for inspection with the BSMI before the products are to be released from the production premises or arrive at the port of entry. Type-approved products designated by the BSMI permits the applicant to print the mark, the Roman letter T, followed by a designated code. This label is generally printed by BSMI. Commodities manufactured by organizations with management systems certified by the BSMI permitting the applicant to print the mark, the Roman letter Q, with a designated code. And lastly, commodities designated by the BSMI permitting the applicant to print the mark, a Roman letter M with a designated code. We have just completed the quick rundown of batch-by-batch inspection, and now we can move on to Registration of Product Certification, RPC. RPC approval process: testing by designated or recognized test labs, submission of test reports to certification body, certificates of RPC and identification number, supplier affixes the commodities inspection mark. This is what the process for RPC, also known as Registration of Product Certification, looks like. When the parties, either local or foreign, decide to supply the regulated commodities subject to the RPC scheme, they shall submit them to the designated testing laboratories, which can be either local or foreign, or a recognized testing lab under mutual recognition agreement for type testing. After the regulated commodities have been successfully type tested, the designated testing laboratories or recognized testing laboratories shall issue test reports to the parties. The local suppliers shall submit the reports and the specified documents to a designated commodity certification body's Appendix O for certification. The designated commodities certification body shall, upon receipt of the applications, issue identification numbers to the applicants to assist them in preparation of the commodity inspection mark. After the regulated commodities have been successfully certified, the designated commodities certification body shall issue certificates of registration of products certification, RPC Appendix I-1 to the applicants. The competent authority shall then register the certified regulated commodities in their database. Accordingly, the local suppliers can affix the commodities inspection mark, Chapter 10, on the registered regulated commodities and commence supply. In cases where there are modifications to the registered regulated commodities, the local suppliers are required to inform the designated commodities certification bodies depending on the type of modifications. Lastly, the local suppliers are required to maintain a technical file on the registered regulated commodities. RPC requirements. So what are the requirements for registration of product certification? CB reports and certification are not accepted as proof of safety compliance under RPC inspection schemes, but can be used. These reports can be leveraged by conversion into an BSMI accepted report in certain cases. If the CB report is issued by a BSMI registered CB lab, the CB report is eligible to be converted into BSMI specific report by a local safety lab without additional testing. Not all CBTLs are registered with the BSMI. In other words, some CB reports will not be eligible to be converted into BSMI specific reports. So please make sure before you start testing that your lab is registered with BSMI. BSMI EMC test reports, BSMI safety test reports, block diagram and schematics, user manual has to be in traditional Chinese. For certification purposes, it can be in English, but must be in Mandarin when sent with the end product. Bill of materials and parts list, internal and external photos showing all 6 sides, label with BSMI mark, 1 sample for EMC safety testing with setup instructions. Other requirements include an ISO 9001 certificate, report of factory inspection, and declaration of conformity. Under RPC, there are actually 7 modules for certification, such as internal control, type testing, quality assurance, and factory inspection, and they all have different requirements, so other information may be required. BSMI approval processes generally take 8 to 10 weeks, depending on the complexity of your product. RPC certification. The certificate itself is valid for 3 years and can be renewed. The certification body must be informed of any modifications and changes to registered commodities and equipment. Technical and non-technical modifications are allowed, but additional testing and recertification may be required depending on the changes that are performed on the device. As for renewals, it is best practice to approach the certification body before the certificate expires because the new certificates must be submitted to BSMI for registration. In case of the new certificate issued by the recognized commodity certification bodies, MRA, the new certificate is necessary for applying to competent authorities for registration. Keep in mind equipment must be registered and suppliers must have certificates. Simply having the certificate and not registering the product is considered non-regulatory or a non-compliant commodity. Suppliers who own certificates without registering with the competent authority are not allowed to supply the certificate regulated commodities to the domestic market, as their commodities will be deemed as non-registered regulated commodities. Any suppliers who supply non-registered regulated commodities shall be imposed with a fine and subject to further penalties. We have just finished registration of product certification RPC, and now we are going to move on to talk about Declaration of Conformity, DOC. DOC approval process: testing by designated or recognized test lab, submission of test reports to certification body, identification number, and commodity inspection mark. Supplier affixes the commodity inspection mark. The DOC approval process is shown here. It is similar to the RPC approval process with a few minor differences. After deciding to supply regulated commodities under the DOC scheme, the parties must have them subjected to type testing by a designated testing laboratory, local or foreign, or a recognized testing laboratory, MRA, as listed in Appendix P and R. Upon successful completion of the type testing, the designated testing laboratory or recognized testing lab will provide test reports to the applicants. To register themselves, local suppliers are required to submit their applications to the competent authority. Upon receiving these applications, the competent authority will issue identification numbers that will be associated with the commodity inspection mark to the local suppliers. Subsequently, the local suppliers will be authorized to affix the commodity inspection mark, Chapter 10, to the registered regulated commodities and commence the supply process. If there are any modifications made to the registered regulated commodities, the local suppliers are obligated to inform either the designated testing laboratory, local or foreign, or recognized testing laboratories, MRA, or the competent authority, depending on the type of modification. Now let's take a look at the requirements for DOC. Again, CB reports and certificates are not accepted as proof of safety and compliance under the RPC inspection scheme, but can be utilized. You will need an eligible CB report issued by a BSMI registered CB lab. For the CB report to be eligible to be converted into BSMI specific report by a local safety lab without additional testing. Here's a quick look at the requirements: a BSMI EMC test report, a BSMI safety test report, block diagrams and schematics, user manual in traditional Chinese, bills of materials and parts list, internal and external photos from all 6 sides, label with BSMI mark, 1 sample for EMC safety testing. The requirements include an RoHS declaration. The manufacturer can fulfill the BSMI RoHS requirements through the following methods: system-level RoHS testing and report, or measurement data for the individual components. In this case, a local supplier representative would review the RoHS information, and if acceptable, the local supplier rep would generate a BSMI RoHS declaration. BSMI may request additional information related to the EUT's RoHS information when carrying out the market surveillance, and these are very important because they expect responses within 28 business days. BSMI approval processes generally take 4 to 6 weeks depending on product's complexity, but is normally quicker than the RPC's procedure. We have just finished going over the Declaration of Conformity, DOC's requirements. We will be moving on to talk about general modification requirements, marking, and surveillance applicable to both RPC and DOC. Let's go over how modifications to equipment are handled. What is considered a modification by BSMI? Any change made to the registered regulated commodity. Change in model number. If the model number is changed, then the commodity must be re-registered, recertified, and a new certificate is required. Change in technical characteristics of equipment and or change of information listed in the RPC certificate. If this happens, a new test report and submission to the certification body to apply for permission is required, and a new certificate of RPC may be issued depending on the change involved. For non-technical changes such as color changes or other changes that do not affect the production of the commodity, the regulated commodities do not have to be re-registered with the BSMI. The regulated commodities also do not have to be recertified with the designated commodity certification bodies or recognized commodity certification bodies, MRA. The local supplier only needs to update the technical file with the modification, for example, merely stating the changes in the aesthetics or color, that it does not affect the safety, EMC, or other regulated aspects of the regulated commodities. So all changes require updates to the technical files with the details of the change. These are the requirements under RPC. As for the DOC scheme, in case the regulated commodity is modified technically, the local supplier shall execute and issue a new declaration to ensure the continued conformity of the product. All regulated commodities must bear the commodity inspection mark before they can be supplied to the Taiwan market. Local suppliers are responsible for ensuring that their regulated commodities are affixed with the commodity inspection mark. The competent authority will conduct spot checks on manufacturers, importers, traders, warehouses when it is deemed necessary. Now let's take a look at the different types of BSMI markings. For registration of product certification, this applies to electrical appliances, fire equipment, electronics, information technology equipment, construction products, gas appliances, baby products, electrically operated hand tools, personal protective equipment, etc., and starts with the letter R. For a declaration of conformity schemes, labels start with the letter D. Equipment that requires this label include computer products, main boards, insert cards, etc. Two examples of the label text is shown here. The first label indicates that the lead percentage content in certain parts of the commodity exceeds the reference percentage value of present conditions. The second is indicating that the cadmium, chromium in certain parts of the commodity exceed the reference percentage value of present conditions respectively. In order to comply with the RoHS marking of presence requirements, any existing BSMI certified product must have their product markings updated accordingly. Here's a breakdown of the various surveillance activities performed by BSMI, starting with spot checks. The competent authority will conduct spot checks on manufacturers, importers, traders, warehouses when it is deemed necessary to check for product marking. They may also initiate product investigations or, if necessary, initiate a recall of products. Some of the responsibilities of the supplier include maintaining declarations or certificates and making them available upon request. Technical documentation must be maintained, submitted to BSMI upon request. The maintenance of the technical file is necessary to enable the competent authority to carry out its investigation duties in the event of complaint, incident, or accident. Upon receiving requests made by the competent authority, the local supplier must provide the declaration of conformity to competent authority within 24 hours and relevant technical files to the competent authority within 10 working days. All documents should be retained for at least 8 years following the RPC's approval scheme or 5 years if following declaration of conformity. This means even retained for at least 5 years after end of product life. If the product is discontinued, the documentation must still be retained for at least 5 years after. Penalties. Fines range from NTD 200,000 to NTD 2 million, which is roughly 6,200 to 62,000 USD. In terms of modification, the supplier is responsible for all modifications in the end, but these product modifications must be informed to certification bodies. Local suppliers shall be responsible for the regular updating of the technical files, especially if there have been modifications made to the declared regulated commodities. Supplementary testing and declarations are required if there are modifications with safety and/or EMC implications. That concludes our discussion of BSMI, and we will now be moving on to NCC. What is the NCC? The NCC is the National Communications Commission, which was created in 2006. The mission of the NCC is to regulate the information communication and broadcasting industry in Taiwan. They are the designated authority in Taiwan for radio and telecommunications terminal equipment, RNTTE. All products able to connect to the public switched communication network or products emitting radio frequency require approval and registration before they can be marketed and sold in Taiwan. The National Communication Commission (NCC) has a large scope to cover. Regulation of the development of the communication and information industry, promoting competition, consumer protection, broadcasting licensing, managing the national radio frequency spectrum, content regulation, and communication standards and specifications. Here are some NCC-regulated products: public switched telephone network equipment (PTSN), wired telephones, fax machines, land mobile communication network equipment (PLMN), GSM mobile and terminal equipment, wireless devices, integrated service digital network (ISDN), private automatic branch exchange (PABX), low power RF devices, Bluetooth, RFID, Wayland, etc. Here is a quick overview of the NCC's verification methods. There are only two forms of NCC verification methods, either by Declaration of Conformity (DOC) or type certification. Taiwan's National Communications Commission (NCC) officially announced a simplified verification scheme, the Declaration of Conformity (DOC), as of July 1st, 2017, to regulate the following Bluetooth devices only: Bluetooth mouse, Bluetooth keyboard, Bluetooth headset, Bluetooth selfie stick, Bluetooth stylus pen, Bluetooth speaker, only DC powered. Under the new DOC scheme, the approval process is simplified, so it's called the Simplified Declaration of Conformity, and will not require local testing, as FCC test reports can be leveraged. There are also a few other methods, including part-by-part verification, self-use verification, simple compliance statements, but we will take a look at DOC and type certification later. Here are the DOC requirements as previously mentioned. Only certain Bluetooth devices can apply for either Simplified Declaration of Conformity (DOC). The applicant must provide the equivalent test report of LP0002 low power radio frequency devices technical specifications. Some examples of devices regulated under DOC: Bluetooth mouse, Bluetooth keyboard, Bluetooth headset, Bluetooth speakers. The NCC recognizes the same documents issued by laboratories in other nations, so long as their regulations are similar to NCC regulations, such as those of the U.S. Federal Communications Commission (FCC) test reports, which are recognized and accepted. Please make sure that the model name and brand name are shown in all technical documents. For simplified DOCs, the NCC certificate is valid indefinitely and has no expiration dates. We have just finished Declaration of Conformity (DOC). We are moving on to type certification. Here's a quick overview of the NCC approval process for type certification. Testing by NCC recognized test laboratory, submit application and test report to certification body, certificate issued based on application and reports, supplier affixes the NCC label to the product. The first thing the applicant must do is perform testing by a NCC recognized test laboratory. This means providing samples, required information, and preparing the application to be submitted to the test lab recognized by the NCC. This can be a foreign lab under MRA and does not necessarily have to be a local Taiwanese lab. After the completion of the testing and the issuing of the test report to the applicant must submit their application and test reports to be reviewed by the recognized certification body before submitting the reports to the NCC. Then the NCC audits the applicant's reports and documents. If there are no problems in the documents, the NCC issues the certification. Manufacturer has the responsibility to maintain compliance of the product, such as the suppliers affixing the NCC label to the product and ensuring the product's continued compliance. Here are the type certification documentation requirements. Application and authorized forms, technical specifications including product specs and antenna specs, NCC test reports, block diagrams and schematics, user manual in traditional Chinese. Again, for the application, the English version for user manual is allowed, but please note the Chinese version is required when the product is available in the Taiwanese market. Internal and external photos showing all 6 sides, label with NCC mark, business license, 1 to 2 samples required. Other requirements, a local representative is required. Again, the model name and brand name have to be shown in all technical documents and should be consistent. The NCC certificate is valid indefinitely and has no expiration dates. The next major topic is module approval, meaning certifying radio modules or using pre-certified radio modules. Under NCC, module approval is allowed. To integrate a pre-certified radio module in a host product, we simply need to obtain a license for the pre-certified module, TTE, telecommunications terminal equipment, and products are required to apply for NCC approval, meaning module is not applicable. System-level approvals are needed for all TTE end products. Short-range devices and products without an RF module are required to obtain NCC approval. All other products can put contains radio module NCC ID number XXXX on the host product. It is allowed to use and integrate a radio module as long as we mention the ID of the module integrated. So what is a host product? It is a product that can work normally without radio module certification, like a computer or notebook PC. A notebook or PC can function normally without a radio module, so the notebook PC is the end host product. But on the other hand, Bluetooth handsets cannot work normally without a radio module, so a Bluetooth handset isn't an end host product. The validity period is indefinite, so no expirations for module approvals. Modification to equipment. Any change to the descriptions on the certificate except for the addition or removal of test category, certification type, and certification items must be reported to the NCC within 15 days after the change. The original certificate must be attached when reporting the change. The validity of the reissued certificate will be the same as the original one. Changes in the model, design, RF performance, or function will require a new type certification. However, when the design or performance of the change still meets the technical specifications, only the test report needs to be changed. The applicant must continuously meet the verification requirements. Equipment in production must continue to meet the product validation requirements of the certified product. So this means if NCC certified telecommunications equipment has any changes in the product, it will require a new certification. Let's discuss product labeling and marking. The NCC logo is mandatory on the product and package. As you can see, there is an example on the slide. Capital CC, fixed code for a declaration of imported equipment types, custom clearance. Capital XX, certification body. Lowercase xx, year. For example, 2024 is 24. Capital YY, type of equipment. Lowercase YYY. Table number, year from 001 to 999. Capital Z, serial number. Lowercase z, table verification number. Capital W, checked code. The table shown on this slide shows the different equipment types and codes that are available. The NCC logo is mandatory on the product and the package. There are also mandatory statements on the user manual. The label should be affixed or printed in the proper position of the equipment body with an appropriate ratio, no maximum minimum size requirements, and the principle is for clarity. NCC logo should be greater than 15 millimeters. This NCC certification mark, together with the inspection qualification number, shall be attached to the product in accordance with the regulations. The frequency shall be single and shall be clear and easily identifiable. Printing NCC logo is mandatory on both the product and the package. It is to be noted that earlier, it was printed only on the product. Let's take a look at the NCC surveillance. Any unauthorized manufacturer, import, sale, or public display of telecommunications-controlled radio frequency equipment that has not been type approved and verified will result in fines. Possible reasons for revoking certificates: changes in the model, design, performance, and has not reapplied for type certification or examination, does not meet new revised technical specifications for type certification or examination. The data obtained at time of the application for type certification or examination was faulty. Failure to comply with technical specifications upon market surveillance testing. Product investigations initiated recall of products. After revocation of type certification certificate or validation certificate within 3 months from the date of revocation or annulment, the same brand of equipment of the same type may not reapply for type certification or examination. The State Telecommunications and Communications Commission or verification agency may be the original holder and the revocation of the cause of notice. The manufacturer shall recycle the sold equipment and equipment after the revocation or annulment of the type certification certificate. If the rights and interests of others are damaged as a result, the manufacturer shall be liable for damages. Retain all technical documents for at least 5 years after end life of product. That concludes the requirements for the Declaration of Conformity, DOC, and type certification for NCC. Because RoHS was previously mentioned, we are going to do a very simple overview just for you to keep in mind. What is RoHS? Taiwan's RoHS, represented by the CNS 15663 standard, is a voluntary conformity standard established by the Taiwan Ministry of Economic Affairs Standards Inspection Bureau. Released on July 30th, 2013, CNS 15663 provides guidance on reducing the presence of restricted chemical substances in electrical and electronic equipment, EEE, in Taiwan. CNS 15663, titled Guidance to Reduce the Use of Restricted Chemical Substances in Electrical and Electronic Equipment, EEE, acts as a clear guide for companies to reduce the use of restricted chemicals in their products for the safety of public health. It outlines specific requirements and methodologies to identify, assess, and manage these hazardous substances throughout the manufacturing process. The Bureau of Standards, Metrology, and Inspection, BSMI, under the Ministry of Economic Affairs, is responsible for implementing Taiwan's RoHS. This standard promotes transparency, product safety, and environmental sustainability for a safer and greener future. Restricted substances for RoHS. The following substances are restricted in electrical and electronic equipment. Lead, PB, restricted to 0.1 weight percentage. Mercury, Hg, restricted to 0.1 weight percentage. Cadmium, Cd, restricted to 0.1% weight percentage. Hexavalent chromium, Cr plus 6, restricted to 0.1 weight percentage. Polybrominated biphenyls, PBB, restricted to 0.1% weight percentage. Polybrominated diphenyls ethers, PBDE, restricted to 0.1% weight percentage. Covered products that fall within the scope of Taiwan's RoHS or CNS 15663 applies to products that encompass a wide range of consumer, industrial, and commercial equipment with a power supply voltage below 1000 volts AC or 1500 volts DC. This includes the following: information technology equipment such as computers, laptops, printers, and monitors, telecommunications equipment such as phones, mobile devices, and routers, consumer electronics, TVs, cameras, audio and video equipment, lighting equipment, such as lamps and luminaries, electrical and electronic tools, such as drills, saws, and soldering equipment, toys, leisures, and sport equipment will include electronic toys and gaming consoles, medical devices, such as monitoring equipment and diagnostic devices, monitoring and control instruments such as meters and gauges, automatic dispensers such as vending machines and ATMs, industrial equipment such as manufacturing machinery and laboratory equipment, as well as other equipment covered by CNS 3765, CNS 14408, and CNS 14336-1. Here's a quick list of the excluded products from Taiwan's RoHS. EEEs not reliant on electricity as a primary power source, EEEs not requiring electrical components for their primary function, EEEs that are part of other products, batteries, large-scale stationary industrial tools, products for military and national defense. Annex C of CNS 15663 provides additional details on exemption. Annex D of CNS 15663 lists 37 conditions for exemptions from concentration limits. Here's an example of Taiwan's RoHS hazardous substance marking. In Taiwan, the hazardous substance marking is a labeling requirement for products containing restricted substances from the specified threshold limits. The marking is used to inform consumers, regulatory authorities, and other stakeholders about the presence of hazardous substances in the product. Companies must clearly mark the hazardous substance content table on the body, packages, stickers, and instruction books of the affected EEE products. Additionally, those utilizing websites to announce the presence conditions of the restricted substances must clearly mark the website addressed on the body, packages, stickers, or instruction books. With this clear indication on the product and or packaging, this forces the manufacturers and consumers to be mindful of the hazardous substances used to make electrical and electronic equipment. Compliance with this regulation not only safeguards Taiwan's markets, but also demonstrates a commitment to safety and sustainable manufacturing. Understanding the requirements, compliance methods, BSMI approval, and the significance of hazardous substances marking allows manufacturers and importers to navigate Taiwan's RoHS successfully, fostering safer and more eco-friendly electronics industry that can build a brighter, more connected future.